Welcome back to our series about super clean code in Angular at the feature level. In this part, we will implement a hands-on tutorial about everything that we discussed in the part 1 that was just a presentation. Okay, so let's get started. If you want to follow along, you can create a new Angular application and you can install the component store. You can add Angular material with this command, and you can also install Angular Flex Layout. So let's get started and implement our architecture. Let's say we want to manage a list of users. So let's go ahead and create our data service. Then we can create our container component. Inside the container component, we can add our presentation components. We want a list, and we want some action panel to modify the list. Then we don't need to forget to add our store. There you go. Right, we can inspect our folders. We have a user service. We have the users container. Inside the container folder, we have the store service, the container component, and our presentation component, the users list, and the action panel. Let's display them. Inside the container, I want a wrapper div. Inside the wrapper div, I want a title. After the title, I want my action panel. And then I want my users list. And I want this to be displayed nicely. Okay, let's see what we have. Good. So we scaffolded our component. Before we start implementing the actual presentation, let's set up the store. First of all, the store does not have to be a singleton, but it needs to mount and unmount together with the container, so we can delete provided in root. Then we need to make this extend the ngrx component store. We need to give it a super. And we need to give it a type. We don't have the user state, so we need to create it. At a minimum, it will have just a list of users. We don't have the users interface, so let's create it. user will have a name, a surname, and email. And that's it. This is our minimal setup of our store. Now we can plug the store in the container. The container will import the store into the list of providers so that it will, the store will mount and unmount together with the container. Then we also need to inject it. Okay, perfect. Now we can proceed to make all of our components with a change detection strategy on push. And our presentation. Action panel. Okay. Now we can start moving backward, sorting out the layout, the input and outputs of our presentation, the list and the actions. Let's start with the list. The list has to be a selectable list, so we can use Angular material for that. Selection list. Let's grab the snippet. And let's adjust it. First of all, this is not shoes list, but a users list. And the value of the selection has to be the all user object. We want to display two properties of the user, say the name, the surname, and the email in two separate lines. Okay. We don't have our user, that's why it is complaining. So let's create the users. Because this is a presentation component, we know that the users must be an input. And we can give it some mock data. Oops. Now we should be able to see our users. Okay. We want to change the position of the checkbox and make it on the left. Okay. We can also add a divider. Better. Okay. Now let's think about the outputs of this component. When we click, this component needs to output the list of the selection of the selected users, and we can use Angular material list properties to do that. When anything is selected, the list component will emit an event, this one, that we need to handle. Let's create the method. Okay, what's going to happen? We need to take the selected users and we need to emit them. This is going to be a list of math options, but we want the values, so we need to map them into the values. Okay. We did not define our user list, which is our template variable. We need to make it available to the TypeScript class through viewChild. Okay, so when the selection change, we will take the selected users and we need to emit them. But we did not create still our output, so let's create it. There you go. There is another thing that we need to take into consideration. We know that we're going to have a bulk action. One of this bulk action will be select all. So the list needs to know that from the external world that will give them an order to select or deselect all. And it has to be an input. So but wait a second, we need to react to this input. Because we need to react to this input, this has to be a set input. How we need to react to it? First of all, we check if the users list is defined, otherwise we do nothing. Then, if we have our users list and we receive a positive input, we need to do two things. First of all, we need to select all the items, and to do that we can use Angular material methods for the list. There you go. We have available deselect all and select all methods, so we need to fire them. So if we are told to select all, we need to select all the items. And we need to emit all the users. Else, if we receive a negative order, we need to deselect all the users. And we need to emit an empty array. Okay, let's check if this works. Perfect, it works. So we have finished with this. We have the layout, we have the inputs, and we have the outputs. Let's take a note of this, because we need to instruct our container to provide us the input and handle the output. Okay. Now we can move on to our actions. The actions are going to contain a select all checkbox, a delete button, and a search input to search our users. Let's implement it. Gonna have a wrapper div. Oops. Inside our wrapper div, we're gonna have the checkbox. And we're gonna have a button. With the icon. Now we're gonna have our search input. Okay, let's see what we have. Right, let's give it some layout. And let's give the form field more space. Okay, great. Now let's think in terms of inputs and outputs. No many inputs here. But when we type something, we need to emit whatever the user type, and when we select this, we need to emit the selected true or false. And we can handle this through reactive forms. So let's create a form. Sorry. Okay, and let's plug it in our template. Okay. Now, let's take the value changes of the fields of the form. So, it's unobservable. Okay. Let's do the same with the search. Okay. And let's subscribe to them and emit their values. And create the emit select all event. Okay. Let's do the same for the search. And let's create emit search. This time it's of type string. Okay. And let's improve this. For example, the search term, we know that we need to debounce it and only take the distinct value. So let's pipe it. Okay. And then since we are subscribing, we also need to unsubscribe. And we can do that with a subject. Let's apply also here. Okay, and let's create it. There you go, and let's fire the unsubscribed subject when the component is destroyed. Great. Okay, so we define this output for the checkbox and for the search, but there is something else that is going on here. We know that this button only needs to be enabled when there is a selection. So we know that we need to control if it is disabled. But because it is a presentation component, it doesn't know why it needs to be disabled. It is agnostic about it. It just knows that it needs to be disabled. So, and this has to be an input. Of type Boolean. Okay. Now we define all our input and output. So we can give this information to our container. Right. And this is our actions. Now let's wire this up. Let's start from the action. We need delete disable input and we need to handle to output event. Let's handle the event. And we need to emit search, handle emit search. Okay, and we are done with this. Let's see what the list needs. Okay. So the list needs the users and the select all input. And as an output as emit selected users. Event. Okay, now we have done. Now, what is this async data that I'm mentioning here? It's going to be a pretty little object to handle all our observable subscription. And we use it like this, we define it like this. Object. Yes. And inside here we can put all the observable subscription we need. So we need delete disabled, $async, then we need the users, $async, then we need select all. Okay. Obviously, we don't have these observable, but we know that they need to come from the store. It needs to come from first from the container class and then from the store. So let's add it there. Okay, so this can be of false. This can be oops. This also can be of false, and this is gonna be our list of users that we can take it from the list. Okay, and we can delete it from here. Select all. Oh, we need a dollar. Okay, so now everything should work again. Everything is working again. The difference is that we are taking the users from our container, but they don't need to live in the container, this information. They need to be in the store. So let's grab them and move them to the store. And let's reason about it. Now we know that the store needs to have these observable as selectors, okay? But let's see if they really need to be in the state. And this depends whether or not they depend on something else, okay? So the users do not depend on anything, so we know that we also have it in the user state, so we can create, we can sort the users out. Let's uncomment it and put it on top. So it's not gonna be a list like that. It has to be an observable of type user array, and it's coming from the state. So this select state dot users. Easy. Okay. Let's see, this select all also does not depend on anything, it's just a user interaction. So we can say that it's coming from the state, and it's an observable type boolean coming from the state. This. And we don't have, we need to provide it. It's a boolean. Okay. Now, this is interesting because this disabled, we say that the disabled has a logic behind it. We need to disable the button when there is no selection, when the selection, the selected users array is empty. So it depends on another property, which is selected users. So rather than adding to the state delete disabled, we will add these selected users to the state. So selected users is an array of users. Okay. Okay, and let's have a selector of it. Start from here. Selected users. So several users, selected users. Great. So these are our state selectors. Okay. Now Now we need to add our combined selectors. For example, this delete disabled. As we said, this depends on the users, on the selected user, so it is an observable type boolean that is derived from the selected users. So is this select these selected users, then I take the value of the selected users and I map it to our delete disable according to the rules that the users must exist, that the variable needs to exist, and the length must be there must be like that, it needs to be empty. Okay, so when it's empty, we need to delete the button, disable the button. So selected users dot length. Okay, great. So we implemented a little bit of logic here, but still nothing is gonna happen. Why? Because we are never initializing the state and we are never modifying the state, so this is completely static. So one thing that we need here is the updaters, and then we also need the effects. Okay, let's wrap up the updaters. So the updaters, they're gonna derive from the events that are handled by the container. So let's write them down. Okay, just let me copy and paste here. The container level, we need to add the methods. But let me clean up first the observable, because these are not coming from here anymore. These have to be coming from, these have to come from the store. So delete disabled is gonna be this store delete disabled. Select all is coming from the store. This select all is store select all, and the users, let's just comment this, users is going to come from the store. Okay, now let's write down the methods that we need to handle. Okay, so we have handle select all. We know that the event is a boolean. Now we have under search. We know that this is a string. Then we need the last one. Selected users. We know it's going to be an array of users. Okay. Before we plug them in, let's make sure that we initialize the state. So at ng on init, we need to initialize the state. So this store set state, and now we pass it an object for the initialization. So let's say that our users have to be our array of users. Actually, let's do it this. Okay, then apart from the users, we need the other property of the state, which is select all, to be false, and the selected users that are originally empty. Okay. So when we on init, we're gonna initialize the state like this. Now, if we look at our application, everything should be running. Great. And now, as you see, the button here is deleted because we initialize the state with this delete disabled being false. Okay, now let's wire up our methods to make this dynamic. So we know that when select all is true, we need to update our state. So this store update select all. This method does not exist, so let's create it. In the updater section. We know this is a boolean. And now we need to decide what to do. This is gonna update the select all state property. To do that, we use patch state. And that's it. It's this simple. Let's proceed with the other one. Let's leave that as the last one. Let's do under search user. Maybe again this store. Okay, let's implement this in updaters. Voila, that's it. Now, let's see what needs to happen with our search. Okay. There you go. It's a string. Now, if we do another patch state here with the search term, the compiler is complaining. Why? Because we don't have a search term in the string. Okay, this is a new thing that we need to implement. So let's add it to the state. String. And let's also add it into initialization of the state. Okay. Now we have it in the state, so we can have a state selector. Okay, and is of type string. Okay, so now we can implement the filtering logic, because we know that we need to filter the users according to their to the search term. Okay, so we can create another combined selector of the filter users. Combined selector, so it's going to be this select. What are the independent observable here? The one that we're going to use. It's going to be these users, this user selector. Then we need to use the search term selector, and we need to combine their values. So two. Okay, so if the search term is empty, we need to return the users. Okay, else. Filter, the filter of filtering the filter user. We can filter just by name. Return users filter. Okay, right. Now we have the filtered users, but still, if we go here, right, now you see that this is getting enabled or disabled depending on the selection, whether there is some selected item or not. Okay, but see, we cannot filter, right? Why we cannot filter? Because this filter users is declared but is not used anywhere. We are still using only the users. So here in our container, instead of passing the users to our presentation, we should pass the filter users. $. This should have $. Filter users. Okay, now it should work. Yes, it works. If you don't believe me, let's add some different users. Maria. Caroline. Okay. Caroline. All right. Maria. Perfect. It's working. Great. And let's see if the rest is working too. Okay. So what happens if I click on select all? Nothing is happening. This is not working. Why is not working? I don't know. Let's check it out. Okay, select all. Let's start from the presentation. Action. Checkbox, select all. That's right. That's why there is a typo. Select all. Let's see. Oh yes, everything is working. Selecting, deselecting, enabling the button, filtering. Okay, great, 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 great. Awesome. Great, guys. So now we did not handle the delete event because we would need an effect. This took a while. It took a while just for the setup, but trust me, I promise. After the setup is done, adding some extra logic and extra complexity is really, really, really easy. So the next tutorials, the next episode will be really, really fast. Okay, and you will see how amazingly we can add quite complex logic in a really, really in a breeze. Okay. Next thing we have to do, we need to implement effects. So we need to take care of our user data service, and we will also improve this functionality here because it is semi-intelligent. Because, for example, because not everything is selected, why this select all is still selected. So we need to make this more intelligent. Okay, guys. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you again in the next episode. Right. Bye bye, guys.